This is the story of how John and Martha, a retired married couple, set off on an Alaskan cruise with Holland America. In Skagway, they sign up for the Gold Rush Trail Tour, where the guide tells a suspiciously mysterious story. A simple tour suddenly turns into a real urban legend. That evening, back in their cabin, they can't get the story out of their heads. And then, both suddenly hear a strange rustling at the door. As the Holland America ship slowly pulled into Skagway, Martha pressed against the deck railing as if she was afraid to miss a single detail. It wasn't so much the town that impressed her, but this very moment of arrival. The ship, huge as a city, smoothly glided to the pier, as if testing its old joints. Down below, people flashed by, some waving, some hurrying with luggage, and the air was thick and invigorating, with that special northern aroma, mixing pine, fresh coffee, and a faint hint of the past. "Look, John, that yellow bus. It's just like in the movies from my childhood," Martha said quietly, gently tugging his sleeve. "If that bus is older than me, I want compensation," John grumbled, not taking his eyes off his phone, where he was already checking the weather forecast for the next 2 days. "Honestly, I swear these tours are always the same old song. Gold, mystery, leave your dollars as a souvenir." Sheesh, gold or bears, didn't matter. She'd long noticed, the older you get, the more you believe that every trip has a little room for a miracle, even if it's hidden as a guide's joke or a forgotten museum ticket. When the ship finally docked and the deck filled with instructions for disembarking, Martha suddenly felt like a freshman at graduation, a little lost, but full of anticipation. Naturally, John was first to line up at the exit, just in case he'd be last to leave. His drive for discipline always amazed Martha. She thought he'd relax in retirement, but apparently some habits are stronger than age. "So, Mrs. Larson," John shook his head, adjusting his hat. "You didn't forget your magic scarf, did you? Maybe they only hide gold for people with polka dot scarves." "Nope, got it right here," Martha replied with a smile, unwrapped her old favorite scarf, and playfully waved it in John's face. "For luck, you check your pockets. Maybe you'll find some nuggets in there." They stepped onto the pier and almost immediately blended into the stream of tourists, cheerful, armed with cameras, and seemingly ready to believe anything as long as it was told with passion. Martha realized this was that very feeling of a beginning, when nothing's clear, but inside you already sense this is where a new story starts, the one you'll later retell to friends and family, embellishing it more with every glass of wine. By the gangway, there was a mixed crowd, and next to them, a guide, a young guy in a bright jacket with a mischievous smile. He joked so easily with the passengers that Martha instantly felt, this guy knows a thing or two about stories, and might even convince John that not everything in the world is about price tags. "Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget your scarves and your skepticism," the guide shouted, greeting them. "Today we're going hunting for gold, but if all we find are new memories, don't be disappointed." "Now that's our style," John grunted. "If we don't find gold by the end of the day, at least we'll have a couple new aches from all the hill walking." With that, they joined a small column of curious, slightly bewildered, but adventure-ready travelers. Martha felt the first pleasant chill down her back, not from the cold, but from the anticipation that something special was sure to happen today. Maybe more than one thing. And as the bus slowly pulled away, Martha whispered to herself, "The main thing is not to forget to write all this down later, and let John grumble all he wants, but if there is gold, we're splitting the scarf." The bus started up, creaking along the old road, and Martha, settling by the window, quickly opened her purse to check she had everything she needed for the tour. Next to her, John untied a bag of nuts, as if he knew. No strategic supply, no tour is complete. Out the window, sparse wooden houses floated by in the morning fog. It was as if they weren't even made of wood, but from the kind of mirage a tired traveler dreams up on the second day of a hike. The guide, who introduced himself as Tommy, didn't give the passengers even a minute to get bored. He suddenly slowed his voice, like switching the radio to Northern Legends. Did you know that the first gold prospector here found gold just by scooping water with his mug from a stream? Imagine just walking through life, grumbling about your wife or husband, and then suddenly, in your mug, along with everyday worries, a little gold flake. Now that's a morning. I bet they still charged him for the mug after, John muttered, so only Martha could hear. She almost choked with laughter, imagining a church service. Today, we pray not for health, but for luck in the gold fields. Meanwhile, Tommy continued, now, almost casually, his voice a little lower. But you know, gold in Skagway isn't so simple. No matter how hard you search, gold only comes to those it's meant for, and those it's not meant for. Well, sometimes they just disappear, believe it or not. Disappear? A lady behind them asked, but Tommy just smiled mysteriously, as if he already knew the rest, but was saving it for the juiciest part of the trail. Martha felt a switch flip inside her. On one hand, of course, these are just stories for tourists. But on the other, why do all the locals have that special cat who ate the canary smile? The guide glanced at each window, as if checking that no gold spirits were eavesdropping on their conversation. Watching all this, John leaned over to Martha and quietly whispered, "You ever notice how the locals look at us like they know something we haven't figured out yet? Maybe there's a secret contest on this bus. Whoever scares the tourists best gets a discount for next Christmas." Yeah, Martha played along. Or maybe if we don't get scared, instead of gold, we'll get free pie. Would you risk your waistline for a prize like that? Meanwhile, the bus was entering a forested pass. Tree branches stretched almost right up to the windows, and the fog curled so thick it felt less like a tour, more like a journey into someone's fairy tale. Suddenly, everything got quieter. Conversations faded. Even the engine purred softer. Martha caught herself gripping her scarf. Here it comes again. That fog. Those chills. John snorted, but behind his skepticism, Martha sensed he was just as tense as she was. At that moment, the guide glanced back, winked, and said, "Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. No one's ever disappeared from our bus. Well, except that one time. But that's another story." The bus rattled over bumps as Tommy suddenly grew quiet, almost freezing as he searched for the right words. His cheerful tone shifted to something strangely thoughtful, as if someone from the mist outside had whispered in his ear. He started speaking softer, without his usual ease. "Friends, gold in Skagway isn't just a metal. People here say it still keeps many awake at night. Some search for it their whole lives, and still leave empty-handed. Others find something but lose much more. They say gold picks its own owner. And sometimes when someone is too greedy or too stubborn, it simply disappears, believe it or not." Martha turned to John, smiling so she wouldn't show the flicker of anxiety that pricked under her ribs. She gently squeezed his hand, not so much for herself, but to distract her husband from another grumpy remark. But John, feeling her gesture, just smirked, leaned over and whispered, "See? We come here, and already. Instant adventure vibes. Think if I had a metal detector, gold would choose me, or would I disappear on the spot?" "Even gold wouldn't be able to handle you," Martha replied playfully, but she noticed how the lightness in the group faded. A hush had settled, and even their new friend Linda was quiet, her eyes a bit wider than before. The town outside the bus windows looked nothing like the postcards. Houses from the gold rush days flickered between the trees, old signs with peeling paint, odd markers pointing back to where it all began, and even a mailbox shaped like a gold nugget. One passerby, an old man in a hat, slowly looked up and seemed to stare right at John. John just snorted. "See? The locals are already watching to make sure we don't take anything extra. Don't let them get a look at your scarf, Martha." The tour had suddenly shifted from a simple stroll to a kind of treasure hunt. Every alley beckoned, every sign felt like an echo of the very legend Tommy kept tossing into the foggy air. And even though nobody said they were scared, Martha could feel that not just her hand, but her heart was pressing closer to John. Like it or not, these stories hook you more than you'd care to admit. Suddenly, the bus braked in front of a crooked little gate, behind which was an overgrown yard and an old, peeling house that looked more like a movie set. Tommy turned to the group, his eyes suddenly very serious. "And now, friends, I'll show you the very place where rumor has it gold disappears all by itself. Don't be scared. If anyone suddenly feels like heading back, just say so. Around here, they're strict about it. Gold doesn't like jokes, believe it or not." Martha glanced at John. He was holding her hand tightly, and, for the first time all day, seemed to have forgotten his usual skeptical jabs. Everything suddenly felt very real for a moment, and even the air in the bus thickened, as if someone had quietly pulled the curtain closed on the ordinary, safe world. The trail started with a barely visible staircase made of damp planks, leading down into thick moss and dappled forest light. Martha clutched her scarf, maybe from the cold, maybe from the sense that they were crossing the very line between a tourist stroll and a real legend. Tommy walked ahead, turning to the group now and then, skillfully weaving around roots and bogs, as if he'd grown up here among these pines and the ghosts of the past. "There was an old man here," Tommy began, his voice especially soft, as if he was afraid to disturb the forest. "He said he used to hear the whisper of the mist at night. If you really listen, he claimed, you can find out who's meant to find gold and who's meant to get lost. And sometimes, he said, the mist leads someone off the trail. Believe it or not." The group froze for a second. Even the birds seemed to have flown away from these stories. John, walking beside Martha, suddenly slowed his pace. His hand landed on her shoulder, not as usual, but a little tighter, with a childlike awkwardness. "You know, when I was a kid, I was afraid of the dark," he suddenly mumbled, not meeting her eyes. "I always thought if you stood in the shadows too long, something would start moving and grab your ankle. Yeah, I grew out of it, but sometimes it still feels like there's something real out there in the dark." Martha looked at her husband with unexpected tenderness. She'd carried this secret belief inside her for a long time, not in scary stories, but that our world is just a little bigger and more mysterious than it seems over morning coffee. And suddenly, there among the moss and damp planks, she wanted to share it out loud. "I always believed in all kinds of mystical things," she admitted, not even trying to joke. "Maybe that's why I love traveling. You never know. Maybe around the next corner you'll run into something you couldn't tell anyone about. Because who'd ever believe it?" John smiled, but without his usual skepticism, and Martha realized sometimes even the most stubborn realist needs a fairy tale, especially when there's so much fog all around. Just then, Tommy stopped, raised his hand, and motioned for the group to gather closer. The trail fell especially quiet, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. "Up ahead is the part not everyone dared to enter," he said, his tone especially serious. "Believe it or not, but the trail goes on to a place not everyone came back from. If anyone wants to turn back, now's the time." Martha felt a little wave of embarrassment ripple through the group. Someone coughed nervously. A lady in a bright raincoat tried to cheer everyone up with an awkward joke. "Well, at least I didn't buy these shoes for nothing. Maybe they'll lead me to some kind of prize, even if it's not gold." Everyone burst out laughing, as if that was just what they needed to blow the fear away, and the fog seemed to drift aside a little, letting the group deeper into the heart of the Alaskan story. The trail narrowed, and the group moved almost single file, every step creaking on the old boards. Tommy slowed down, turned to the tourists, and leaned on the railing as if he was about to tell something truly special. That familiar smile appeared on his face, the one that made Martha want to either burst out laughing or wrap herself up tighter in her scarf. "Here's another tale for you," he said, pointing to a hill where, according to him, the biggest gold nugget was once found. "They say that chunk of gold brought nothing but trouble to its owner. As long as the nugget was in the house, the family had nothing but bad luck. The son moved away, the chickens died, and the soup always got cold. And the moment a neighbor took a piece, his roof started leaking and his dog ran away. That's riches for you, folks. Some people waited for gold, but all they got was a headache. Believe it or not. John snorted, stepping off the trail a bit closer to the bushes, and tossed over his shoulder to Martha. Honestly, if we ever had a gold nugget at home, I think our soup would always be cold too. But probably not because of the gold. That's just your special talent. Martha protested, throwing up her hands. John, stop teasing. What if it's true? Sometimes that really happens. You find something and then, it's like luck just passes you by. There's a reason these legends stick around. Oh, Martha, look, if you believed every guide, you'd have to brew your morning coffee with 3 charms and a lucky rabbit's foot, John quipped, but his voice carried not just irony, but an attempt to chase away his own chill. Look, Linda's with us. If you believe the local stories, she's already got 5 treasures in her backpack. She just won't admit it. Linda laughed, picked up her backpack, and shook it like a lottery ticket. If I find anything, I'll share, but only for pastries. Martha tried to smile, but inside she felt a sense of anxiety, like before a thunderstorm. Except this wasn't a storm, it was something else. The trail suddenly grew darker, a sharp, cold wind burst through the trees, and fog began swirling right around their feet, curling in wisps around their boots. Everything fell silent. Even John didn't have a comeback, just quietly took Martha's hand. Tommy looked back at everyone as if counting heads. The guide's voice sounded suddenly solemn, like a history teacher trying to give students one last scare. And now we're heading back, if, of course, everyone's still with us. Martha couldn't help but scan the faces in the group. Everyone looked a little paler. Some chuckled nervously, others pretended to film. But in their eyes was the same thing, hoping for a miracle, or at the very least, a pie for bravery. They turned around and the group slipped back along the trail, as if the earth itself was urging them toward the light. And Martha suddenly felt how much she wanted to stick close to John, even if he spent the whole way back making jokes about cold soup. The way back seemed shorter, or maybe they just wanted to get out of this damp fairy tale with all its whispers and fog. The tourists chatted much more quietly than on the way in, and John, apparently deciding it was time to lighten the mood, leaned thoughtfully over to the edge of the trail and suddenly picked up a small, shiny stone. He rolled it around in his palm, as if checking the weight. "Well, Martha, looks like I found treasure," he announced loudly. "We'll put it in the soup at home. Maybe it'll bring us luck with the chicken." Martha tried to laugh, but it came out as a nervous chuckle, like the fog had gotten stuck in her throat. "Leave that stone here," she whispered, "just in case. What if it really is something special?" At that moment, Tommy, who'd been joking around up until then, suddenly fell silent and turned around. His eyes were serious now, maybe even a little worried. "It's better not to take anything from here," he said quietly, looking straight at John. "Jokes about gold don't go over well around here, really, believe it or not. But in this town, people usually put things back, just in case." John shrugged, theatrically put the stone back on the trail, and cracked. "I was just checking if it'd stick to my hand. Okay, Martha, your turn. If you see something shiny, don't grab it, or they won't let you have any pie." With this mostly cheerful but slightly tense mood, the group finally made it out onto the wide road, where they could hear the sound of cars, and the first city signs encouraged them. "Skagway welcomes seekers." Only now, those words felt less like a tourist slogan and more like a warning. Linda, walking behind, gave Martha a sly wink. "Well, no gold this time, but we still have our nerves intact. We've earned a cafe stop. Let's celebrate the slippery nature of luck." There was still a strange little spark in everyone's eyes, a mix of relief and a slight shiver, like after a really good, scary story. Everyone seemed to make it back. No one disappeared, but inside, a small, shaky worry remained, tickling more than any chill. The bus was already waiting for the group by the curb, and Tommy made a farewell joke, but not as cheerfully as before. Believe it or not, but in our town, even memories sometimes turn to gold, so at least keep the stories for yourselves. John nodded, wrapping himself up in Martha's scarf, and quietly muttered, "Well, if memories turn to gold, I'll be happy to collect them, as long as I don't have to hide my wallet under my pillow at night." The bus started up, taking them back to the ship, and Martha looked out at the fog, which now seemed almost friendly, or at least had let them go in peace for now. Late at night, after the ship had already left Skagway and was swaying in the gray Alaskan darkness, John was going through his things before dinner when he suddenly pulled out that same shiny stone from his pants pocket. He held it in his hand, squinting, as if checking whether his memory was playing tricks on him. "Martha, look at this," he called out, trying to sound upbeat. "I think I'm officially a millionaire now, but somehow, gold always comes with surprises. This one seems to have just stuck to me." Martha tore herself away from the mirror, where she'd been trying for the third time to adjust her scarf to cover up all the extra after dinner. She walked over, took the stone in her hands, and felt a cold shiver run down her back. "You left this on the trail," she whispered. "John, be honest. Are you messing with me?" "I swear, honey, if I could remember how it ended up in my pocket, I'd already be out shopping for a new car." John laughed, but it came out kind of rough. "Guess I should expect the soup to get even colder now." Martha sat down on the bed, squeezed the stone, and suddenly, right on cue, the lights in the hallway flickered and went out. For a moment, the whole cabin was plunged into darkness. Outside the window, there was the crunch of footsteps, and then silence again, as if the fog from the forest had come for a midnight visit. John quickly turned on the flashlight on his phone, lit up his gray beard, and, trying to lighten the mood, whispered theatrically, "Well, Mrs. Larson, looks like we really did disturb someone on that trail. What do you think? If I put the stone under my pillow, will I get an Alaskan pension?" "Only if there's nothing else under your pillow." Martha managed a smile, though inside she was all tied up in knots. "Fine. If you disappear tonight, I'll at least get to finish the pie by myself." They both laughed, at first uncertainly, then louder, drowning out their nerves. But as Martha was about to put the stone back in her bag, something in her still skipped a beat. What if? John caught her look and just winked. "It's fine. We'll tell this story at dinner. Maybe some of our new friends will laugh, or maybe someone will have a good tip on how to get rid of golden gifts." They stepped out into the hallway, where the lights were back on, and headed for the restaurant. Like always, but now every step felt a little lighter, and every glance at each other a little more cautious, as if someone invisible was whispering over their shoulders. Believe it or not, evening on the ship spread out cozy and lazy, like freshly brewed tea in porcelain cups. Martha and John settled into a corner of a small bar, the same table by the window where you could watch the city lights disappear into the distance at night. Around them, spoons clinked. Someone argued about the next day's excursions, and the waitresses smiled as if nothing strange could ever happen in this room. But John suddenly grew more thoughtful than usual, stirring the sugar bowl with his spoon. "Martha," he glanced at his wife, "I'll be honest, I can't remember the last time something shook me up like this. I kept thinking, what kind of adventures can old folks even have? And yet, one story, one bit of fog, and I don't even recognize myself. Maybe there really is room for a little mystery in life. Or maybe it's just time for us to be scared together a little more often." Martha looked at John, and for the first time all day, she saw that real, honest confusion in his eyes, the kind that's so rare in a grown man. Without thinking, she took his hand. Warm, strong, familiar, but now just a little damp from nerves. "John, I've always dreamed of hearing something from you that wasn't about cold soup. Now I finally have something to brag about to my friends. My husband is a real-life mystery hero, not just the coat check manager and budget accountant." And suddenly, As if someone had picked the perfect moment, right outside the door came that same soft, scratching noise. Not loud, but enough to make them both jump and exchange a look. John smiled but quickly pressed his lips together, and Martha felt her heart start to beat a little faster. "You know what?" she said. "Let's not tempt fate. Let's take your golden stone, put it on a tray, and leave it out in the hall. Let the mystery feel at home somewhere out in the corridor." John, playing it up, pulled the stone out of his pocket and set it on a little dessert plate, then carefully opened the cabin door. Together, trying not to laugh, they placed the tray on the carpet in the hallway like they were making a secret offering to the spirits of Skagway, or at least to the cleaning staff who'd be collecting treasures from the deck in the morning. "There you go," John breathed out, relieved. "Whoever wants it can have it. We've had enough adventure for one trip." When the door closed, the cabin felt suddenly brighter and calmer, as if all the fog and worries had stayed out in the hall. Outside, the ship moved slowly away from the shoreline lights, the water turning silver in the night, and it felt like this night was destined for a happy ending. Morning on the ship greeted John and Martha with soft light and a gentle rocking. The ship cruised calmly along the glassy water, and outside everything looked as normal as it did before the whole adventure. But inside, there was that odd aftertaste you get when the night feels longer than it should, and every little thing suddenly seems important. Martha woke up early, checked her purse and scarf out of habit. Everything seemed in its place, but somewhere near her heart, there was this new kind of itch. John was already making coffee on the little machine, winked at his wife, and announced grandly, "Well, Martha, congrats. Now you're married to a millionaire ghost. See, the stone's gone. So either the gold chose me, or someone else got hungrier than I did last night." Martha smiled, covering her mouth so she wouldn't laugh too loudly. There was something absurdly sweet about his teasing, especially when everything outside looked so ordinary and boring, but there was a tiny adventure alive inside. Heading down to breakfast, Martha spotted Tommy in the hall and, fighting her embarrassment, walked over. She lowered her voice, as if sharing an old family recipe. "Tell me, do you often have, well, cases like this with souvenirs? We left a little something for luck, and now we're wondering, should we expect anything to come back our way?" The guide smiled his trademark mysterious smile, and leaning in, whispered, "Believe it or not, but here, anything people take either gets returned or finds its own way back. The main thing is not to lose your sense of humor, and just keep traveling. The more stories you collect, the less there is to be afraid of." John and Martha, stepping out into the fresh air on deck, couldn't help but look at each other. Then, at the empty tray by the door. The stone was gone, as if it had never been there at all. John touched Martha's scarf, stroked her arm, and they both shivered, maybe from the morning chill, or maybe from the very thought that gold really does choose its owners, or at least those who appreciate a good story over a cup of hot coffee. And as the ship drifted farther away from Skagway, they suddenly wanted to believe that little adventures like this are what make an ordinary life golden.